Hey guys, welcome to TST Garage. I'm Bart. In this episode, I have the pleasure of working on a GSX-8R and a GSX-8S. We are going to be installing the new TST WORX Airbox on one of these bikes. The installation on the other bike will be vastly the same, so we'll just mention the steps. We'll show you video of the different steps that are required for that particular bike, and we'll just keep it moving. Now, this is a full replacement for the OEM Airbox. Our previous technology looks like this. This is the OEM Airbox with our TST Industries velocity stacks and a free-flowing lid. So we already launched that kit back in January of 2024, I believe. It's gained some popularity. It provides really nice results for the power and torque output of this bike, but we wanted to go further and also reduce the mass. This behemoth is 3.15 pounds. When replaced by our full carbon fiber low mass Airbox, you actually save a lot of mass, a lot of weight off the bike, in addition to increasing the performance output. So the new Airbox comes in at 0.85 pounds. That's just over 13 ounces. That is a pretty big weight savings, and it also looks the biz. We made sure to incorporate all the best design practices into this Airbox, make it compact, make it lightweight, and also allow for the mounting of a piggyback reservoir shock on this bike. Now, when you use the OEM Airbox, whether you change some of the components on it like stacks and filter and lid, or keep it stock, you can only do a remote reservoir shock. So this also gives you the ability to choose from a wider variety of racing shocks if you're going to go racing with this thing. This is not homologated for street use. I only recommend this for track riders and racers. You guys are going to do what you're going to do. I do have to mention that this is not approved for road use. It is a very simple installation. The most complicated part is getting the stock parts off. Our parts go back on the bike in a vastly easier manner. This is a reusable filter. It does come pre-assembled like you see here. Once you get it dirty, after a couple of days at the track, you just take off this cap, you wash it out, and you re-oil it, and you're back to being good to go. If you need the detergent and the oil, we do have those in stock. They are MWR brand, but we always keep a bunch of that stuff in stock, so you could stock up here while you purchase your Airbox. Now, most people really want to know, what does this actually do for me? So we are going to roll footage of two graphs that we have from our studies on our dyno, in our dyno facility. One of these will be a bone stock bike versus what we found to be one of the optimum packages that we've built so far. Now, this is, we're going to roll this footage in this video. It's fresh as of September 2024. We will iterate, and in the future we will likely attain better gains. So if you want to see the most up-to-date charts, those will be in the product pages on our website for this particular product. So let's run through really quick. I'll spare you all the details. Just look at the curve. The red curve is this Airbox mounted on the bike along with our Tune M4 exhaust, and we ran this a bunch on the dyno, and Alex tuned it, and he kept tuning and trying to squeeze as much out of it as possible while keeping it safe so that we don't have any detonation, pre-ignition, any detrimental things happening, and the result is pretty clear. The entire horsepower curve just shifted way up, right about 6,000 RPMs on the stock setup. There's a big dip or flat spot. That is all lifted out. This bike just keeps on climbing, and it doesn't drop off at red. So you keep on getting faster and faster and faster towards red line. You shift and then just keep going faster. And that's what we really want. Now, if you feel that's a little unfair because most people already have some kind of intake component mounted and exhaust, well, we did do a separate study where we used the same exhaust. It really doesn't matter which one because we just varied the tune and the intake. So we have stock intake and we have our V1 intake, which is what I showed you here. It's the stacks and the open lid, and that is also stacked up against our Airbox system. and you'll see how vastly it makes a difference from about 6.75 thousand RPM all the way to red. You have so much more power, so much more torque. It's a really big gap above all the other technologies. So if this technology tickles your fancy and you'd like to get it installed on your bike, the next steps I will be presenting in this video will empower you to do so with simple tools in no time at all. Now, I did want to make one note. We do offer a quick turn throttle. This limits the amount of throw or degrees traveled in the wrist that it takes to open your throttle 100%. The way this is done is by limiting the physical distance that it has to travel, but in the ECU, we reprogram your ECU to take advantage of this shorter throw. So if you guys are purchasing this and you're considering purchasing this, just make sure to select the appropriate flash tune level so that this is actually incorporated into the programming. Otherwise, you'll be running around at probably 75% throttle and not have access to the rest. So keep that in mind, and I'm pretty much done yapping here. I'm really amped to get into this bike and show you guys how simple this is to install and get it all figured out. So let's get that going. In preparation for the actual installation, I do have to mention this. Some bikes will already have a race kit mounted on it. Here you see one of those race kits. It does break down vastly different than the OEM body components. We will leave that version alone. I believe that any owner who has a track-specific bike that has race body work on it either works on it themselves and knows how to break it down, or has a shop that does that, so that same shop would probably be the one handling the installation of this airbox. We'll leave this alone, and we will actually present on the S model because the tail components, everything's really the same on the bike. The airbox is the same, the tank's the same. There is one set of steps that's a little bit different. It's how the forward tank components break down. We will roll footage of how that comes off in the flow so that you guys are equipped to suit your needs. Here you see one of our airboxes already mounted on this bike. We have a TTX shock in there. The cross-mounted piggyback reservoir is right here, and this is the part that interferes with the OEM airbox. So again, this airbox will allow you to mount a shock such as this in there. I'm going to roll this away and I'm going to start ripping down the S model. Let's begin the process by removing the seats. I'll be using a 5mm Allen to remove the driver's seat. Now we hop to the front of the tank here. There are two push pins holding this center tank fairing in place. We're going to push the centers in on those, and that unlocks them. Push the center on each of these. That causes them to unlock, and you can push the whole thing forward and remove it. Now we go back to our 5mm Allen. I'm going to remove this screw here. One additional black head screw on top here. Switch to a 4mm Allen. Remove this screw here, right up above the head. And then I'm going to grab a small flathead screwdriver, pop out the head on the push pin right in this area on the inside, just above the radiator. And that will be the final fastener for this fairing. This is the fastener I'm talking about. There's only one like it in this area, so you can't miss it. In its locked state, it looks like this. Pop up the head, take it out, good to go. I'm going to repeat the steps on the other side of the bike. Now both of these fairings are free to come out. There is a mushroom head fastener strip right about here, so we need to pry up on this, disengage that strip. It comes off pretty easy. Once this is off the bike, we push forward to clear tab and window features up by the radiator. We have these tabs here with rubber covers on them. They do tab into these windows here. Once you push that forward, it clears and we can remove it. Repeat on right side. And now we have access to the fasteners that hold our tank on. The next thing to come out will be the tank. All right, so for the R model, there is a divergence of steps from this point forward. So we're gonna run this clip here showing you the steps that are specific for GSX-8R, and then we're gonna hop back in where we reconverge into the main steps for the rest of the vehicle. We'll be removing this panel. There are 2 push fasteners up front here. Press in the centers to unlock them, then move the whole panel forward, and it comes out like this. I'll show you guys how these fasteners work. In their locked position, the center button is flush with the body of the fastener. When you press the center in, that now unlocks this and it's able to be withdrawn. Going back to my 5mm Allen, I'll remove this fastener here. This position gets a 5mm tool head and silver screw, no shoulder. This fastener up here has to come out. This is a black fastener, 5mm head. It does have a shoulder. And this last one here, also 5mm head, silver, and no shoulder. I'm gonna switch to a 4mm tool. We're gonna remove this fastener here, which is silver, 4mm head, and it does have a shoulder. One additional fastener here, right at this split, at this vertex of all of these lines here, right behind, there's a push fastener that looks and functions the same as the ones by the tank area. We push in the center, and that will unlock it. And then manipulate the plastic so that we can actually withdraw that fastener. Out it comes. So we still have one more fastener using the same tool. It is down here. This one is a blackhead 4mm tool fastener, and it does have a shoulder. Now all the fasteners are out. This fairing is technically loose now. We just need to pull it in the direction of the axis of this screw. There are some mushroom head fasteners behind it. Okay, that dislodges them. And now I'll pry back on this lower section. When you rotate this plastic this way, it dislodges and disengages the clips along this line. And now we'll be able to pull back on it and get it out of the way here. This tab here interfaces with this black plastic fairing piece. It does have a lip down there, so this needs to be withdrawn from that interference. Now I'm gonna work on this side of the bike. The steps are exactly the same, so we're gonna skip the filming portion. We are now gonna grab a 10mm socket, remove the forward bolt that holds the tank onto the frame. Let's see if the tank will swivel up. Okay, it swivels just fine. So we're gonna pull it up and gain access to all the hoses. We need to remove the aerator hose, the overflow hose. Now with the tank rotated up, we're gonna have to first disconnect the breather and overflow hoses. Mine come off really easy at the moment because we've been taking them off and putting them on very often recently. Yours will likely be stuck on. You may need to do it with a set of pliers. All right, once those hoses come off, now we have a little bit more range here. I'm gonna unplug the fuel sender and pump connector, and finally the fuel line. First, the orange clip needs to come down to expose the tab windows, and then you press the tabs in, and that disengages the lock. permitting you to withdraw that fuel line. And I do have some fuel coming out of there, so I'm going to put a rag around it so it doesn't drip down on the bike. Now the tank is disconnected from hoses and connectors. Let's grab a 5mm Allen and remove the tank bracket from the subframe. I'm going to be able to take this tank off completely with its bracket, and we have access. Now let's remove this lower cover. To do that, we will push in the centers of these fasteners and remove them. And then there will be two other fasteners, one up front here and one on the matching location on the other side. And now push down. This tab clears out and the whole thing pops out. We can remove it. Now let's hop up top. All right, let's go ahead and disconnect the air temperature sensor from the airbox. Here you notice we have a cap. We've eliminated the AIS components on this bike. The head has caps on it. There's no AIS system, pair system, so there's no hose here. If your bike still has the hose here, please reference our smog block-off video for air injection system removal. Let's go ahead and remove the battery. Also going to take this rubber part that sits below the battery. It'll enable us access to these two 10mm screws that we will need to remove. Let's go ahead and take the airbox lid fasteners off, two up here and two down here. Those will be tough to see in our video, but there are only two more fasteners that look exactly like this down here. We're going to grab ourselves a longer reach Phillips and remove those. I'm going to get the lid out. The lid will not be reused with our new system, but we do still need the screws because those will complete our assembly of our new lid. So let's hang on to those. Take the filter out. Now, the airbox is essentially loose with the exception of these two 10mm head screws. So let's get those guys out now. Loose here. Now, there is a uniclamp, which means there are two clamps with a rod and a long screw holding the funnels onto the intake of this bike. So we will need to get in here, grab a 3mm Allen. We're going to loosen this clamp. The idea is to loosen the clamp enough so that both of the clamping surfaces are completely unlocked from the intake. And now I will wiggle this until it releases and I can scooch it forward. The other hose that goes to the bottom of the airbox just popped off. So during reassembly, we will have to pop this on its appropriate spot. Now, I'm gonna bring this up here, take the uniclamp off so that I don't damage it in the process here. Now we have the job of extracting this airbox from within the confines here. We do have a giant wiring loom on this side, smaller on this side. There are some tabs here. We need to make sure that we absolutely do not damage any of the wires within this loom. So you don't want to keep tearing up against the surfaces of this loom or the other side. So be very gentle there. We'll need to wiggle and rotate until we release all of our tab surfaces. So there's a tab right here, somewhere mid-span, forward aft of the opening in the top. Once that clears out of that loom, I'm able to rotate and clear the other side around the loom. And once those tabs clear, this kind of just comes out. Still needs a little bit of a rotate here. These are the tabs that pose the most challenge getting out of there. So if you're stuck on the way out, make sure you're keeping mindful of where these are falling in there and interfering. As soon as you clear them, all of this does come out. So the key to getting it out nice and smooth and without too much trouble is to just keep making sure that they're clear on the way out. Now, at this point, the next step will be to move the air temperature sensor to the new box. I'm going to remove this Phillips head screw. This screw will not be reused. We do send hardware with our airbox to mount this on the new unit. So the area for the mounting of the sensor on the new box is right here. However, we do need to gain access to the inside of the airbox, and like I mentioned, it does come pre-built. So just going to have to remove all of these fasteners. They are push fasteners. You unlock them by pressing in the center, and then they just pop out. The airbox splits, and now we have access to the inside here. We will make use of the hardware that we send with the new airbox. Screw going from the outside. You notice there's a single hole and a coaxial hole with a recess. That recess is supposed to interface with this O-ring here. Make sure you get that correctly in here. Get that screw through. The nut goes on flange first. Start the thread, and then we could tighten this up using a 3mm Allen on the screw head and an 8mm box wrench or open-ended wrench on the nut side. Once that's tight, we just replace the lid on the airbox. Bring these push fasteners back to this configuration, ready for reinsertion. Push the fastener in, make the top even with the body, and repeat 6 times. Okay, the box is rebuilt. We will aim in the next step to hook up this crankcase breather hose to this port here. Before we do that, we need to make sure that the clamp is on the hose if you are still using the clamp. And what I'd like to do here is reconfigure these 2 hoses. Now, I've eliminated some equipment on this bike, so this hose is free to come out. Yours may require a little bit extra manipulation. This one is more center of the bike, and this one is on the outside. We are going to reverse them. So they're gonna reverse overlap. And now I'll hook up this hose. This is a little bit cumbersome because you need to spread the clamp as you push this on. So now this hose is kind of in a 90-degree configuration. We'll need to untwist it as the airbox gets placed in the correct configuration. No big deal. Let's grab our clamps now. Previously they were held in this configuration. I'm going to have the head exiting on the right side on the bottom, and I'm going to get my hand in here in between the frame component and the throttle bodies and go forward of this hose. Now just make sure that those clamps are loose enough that they will permit the gripping teeth to engage with the throttle body. Now I've aligned the throttle body mounts and my velocity stacks here, so I'm at that point where if I press this in, it should open up over the little ridge and snap on, and then the box will be mounted. We need to grab a 3mm Allen, make sure that the clamp is distributed properly on the clamping surface of the stacks. What I mean about appropriate location for the clamp, it needs to be on the flat surface here between this shoulder and the little teeth on the grippy teeth of the velocity stacks. So once you've made sure that that is actually there, let's start tightening down. So I tighten this clamp down until it gets a little bit more snug. All right, so what I do here is start snugging up the clamp while watching, make sure that I haven't come off the clamping surface. Once I get to a snug point, before I tighten down all the way to bottom, I'm going to check both sides. If any adjustments are need to be made, this is a good time for it. I did come off my clamping surface here on the left side, so I'm going to restore that. All right, once I get all of my clamping surfaces distributed and snug and now tightened all the way down, now the box is secure on here. I'm going to get the temperature sensor plugged in. Now this may have shifted on you. Don't yank on it, just make sure that you have ample reach. Click it on, get the cover on, and then we'll just, once we place the tank back down on here, we'll just need to make sure that this doesn't just get pressed into here and mushed, and doesn't get mushed against any of these steel surfaces. So I think we are ready for the tank now. I'm going to begin the fuel tank reassembly in the aft section, placing the bracket around the frame while making sure that we're not mushing the wiring loom into the new airbox. Start engaging the screws. Okay, it looks like I've distributed the bulk of the wiring harness here properly. It is not pressing on the airbox. It is not being pressed on by the frame components. So now I will just go ahead and tighten down on this bracket against the frame. I will use my T-handle up front to create myself a jack surface so that I can access all of the hoses and connectors. We'll go in the reverse order of disassembly here. You can watch previous steps as I remove the tank. It's just the reverse of that process here. All right, at this point I have the main fuel hose connected, the fuel sender and fuel pump electrical connection connected, the overflow and the aerator connected. The tank can now come down and get screwed back down. And from this point forward, the entire process is the reverse order of disassembly. So I'm going to skip the commentary and just perform the steps. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for this installation. The process is complete. Bike is ready to go. If you enjoyed this video, throw me a like and subscribe. If you enjoyed the parts that I demonstrated how to install in this video, you can head on over to tstindustries.com. That's where you'll find them, along with a whole catalog of parts for this bike, the R model, and many other bikes you may have in your garage. Thanks for watching. Ride safe. We'll see you in the next one.